Connie, hello.
Hi, Sharon. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well indeed. Happy Friday.
Yes, happy Friday and happy first day of spring.
Oh, yes, first day of spring. I wish it reflected in the temperature, but it's
Same here.
clearly not at the moment. But there you go. Never mind. These things are sent to try us. So, speaking of that, where am I speaking to you from? Where are you based?
Well, I am here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and it's home to the University of Michigan, which is actually where the technology for the company that I work for, where it came from.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well, we'll learn more about that a bit later on. But let me start at the beginning. What's your story? How did you end up in the bioscience field? Did you pick it? Did it pick you? How did it come about?
I think that that's really an interesting perspective that a career picks you. But where I'm sitting today, if you were to look at my journey, I think it makes a lot of sense that in many ways, this current position that I have at an emerging high growth biotech is very much something that I was probably meant to do. So my journey really started relatively traditionally for somebody who, let's say, goes to college, gets a liberal arts degree, and decides that they might want to go into a career in medicine. A lot of people go down that path, and a lot of people, including myself, decide that that's not for them. So I think the biotech field is actually a great combination of the scientific work that I did as an undergrad that I kept working on, and then the business aspects of some of my early career development that I ended up in. One of my first jobs out of college was in management consulting, and many of the clients that I worked for were in the biotech field. And I just fell in love with the industry, with pharmaceuticals and the idea of working on human health and working from a different perspective on helping pa.
Okay, so I've heard from another interview that you've done how important education is to you and how that kind of was a big part. Harvard, right? I mean, was that the dream, Harvard, or did it happen along with, you applied to loads and Harvard came through along with others, so you picked it? Why Harvard? I mean, I hear Harvard all the time.
I do as well. I think there's a little bit of probably a lot of mystique about Harvard, and certainly having gone to Harvard as an undergrad and then returned to Harvard to go to business school, there are certain expectations or stereotypes when I meet people who know that about me. I think in actuality, was it a dream school, you asked me? Well, I think that it was definitely one of my top choices, but when it came down to the choice, because I was a teenager here in the state of Michigan, the University of Michigan had a huge draw for me. It was going to be a little closer to home. It was one of those wonderful schools that is sort of this gem in my backyard. And so that choice was a difficult one to make, but I eventually really wanted to leave home, hadn't left home for any appreciable amount of time. In fact, I had never even gone to a sleepaway camp before I went away to college. So it was sort of jumping into the deep end, if you will.
Right.
And I think it's been a wonderful experience because the one thing about a place like Harvard, in addition to the academic training that one gets, I think a big part of it was the community. It was meeting people from all over the country and all over the world, in fact, and a lot of the friendships that I developed as an undergraduate in those 4 years, I've kept over all these years. And I graduated a long time ago. So
Well, obviously, as an alum, it's a community, isn't it?
it
It
is.
stays a community. So I think those friendships that are forged then never really go away, do they? Even if
No,
you don't see people for years, the fact you go, oh, I was at Harvard. Oh, I was at Harvard. Oh, which year were you there? And
that's
then
right.
it's a
But, you bring up
conversation.
a really important point, Sharon, and that's community. I
Yeah.
think that community can be built in all different settings, and it's really important from a professional standpoint as well as a personal standpoint to think about the communities that we belong to and why we are in those communities and how we can give back to the community as well as we take from that community, whether it's a group of friends that you might have a book club with, or
Yeah.
whether it's a network of biotech executives that you might have gone to business school with. Community is really important, I found, in all facets of my life.
Yeah, no, I agree. So talk me through your career. You mentioned, after your education, you did a stint in management consultancy. You've done big pharma, yay, Pfizer. You've done academia, small bio. Was that a set path? Was each one planned, or did you find opportunities just arose?
You know, when you look at the resume, my resume, it might seem like it tells a really great stories. So just on one hand, I have this maybe eclectic background where I've worked in very large pharma. I now work in a very small biotech or biopharma. And then I've also worked in between. So if you think about it, it's a wonderful way of connecting the dots. I know what a big pharma and the machine that they have to get products approved and to market products to physicians and patients and managed care people. That's a very interesting perspective. Where I am today at a much smaller emerging biopharma, we don't have the resources that we had out of Pfizer, but we have to do many of the same processes to get a drug through the development timeframe. And then there's the question of, well, where did these technologies come from? And so the 7 or 8 years that I spent within the University of Michigan working on early stage innovation, that was very instructive to understand how spin out companies might emerge from our academic universities. If
Right.
there's one takeaway from all of that, it's that biotechnology and innovation in healthcare, it really depends on all of those players. You can't lop one off without hurting the other. And it's very much a community of experts and people working in the trenches to get a new product to market.
And how you're in the middle of this community constantly, that importance of these new drugs coming out of academia, how is that right now?
I think that's a important question that we should all be asking ourselves, even as there is a lot of pressure on the academic community to, in some regards, justify its very existence.
Mm.
Don't think it's hyperbolic to say that innovation really starts in the academic lab. And the reason why that is, not everybody is a scientist or really has or needs to have an insight into that, but the universities that are all around the United States have always been at the forefront of being able to investigate without a lot of, I should say, without a lot of shackles of immediate application. What I mean by that is our scientists have traditionally over the years been funded by government funding through the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, to really blue sky big scientific questions, to really understand how our bodies work, how the biology at the very basic level works. And from there, you start to develop hypotheses about, well, if a biological process works this way and it's not working, how might we attack that problem with a new drug or a new sort of intervention? And so that kind of environment is ripe for letting lots and lots of different flowers bloom. And then
Yeah.
some of them actually start to bolt themselves onto more of a process of developing through the different steps that you need to take to get a drug all the way from an idea to an actual innovation. It's a very
Yeah, that
long
long, 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 long road.
road, and it's expensive, and I think there are definitely very good and rational critiques of, well, why does it take so long and why is it so expensive? And there are certainly ways that we can make it less expensive and try to cut down on the time. But at its core, the human body is we don't know a lot of the aspects of it, and it takes a lot of time to make sure that a drug works and then it's safe.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in all the areas of your career, you've had a very illustrious career. What what was the biggest career risk that you've taken to date?
Well, there might have been a lot of smaller risks. I think one of the biggest risks that turned out not to be really a risk, but one of the best moves that I ever made for my career was moving from Boston as a family to the Midwest. And it's not as much a comment about the Midwest as it is to talk about why it felt like a risk to move. So at the time, I had spent multiple years in New York as a management consultant and then working at Pfizer at their New York headquarters. And at Pfizer, I was working on the commercial drug launch and drug product management. So we call that marketing. We worked with sales, really the commercial organization of the company.
Right.
After that, we made a move as a family to Boston. And in Boston, I continued my career at a more mid-sized pharmaceutical company called Sepacor at the time. And now it's Synovion. And so here you have between New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, really the hotbed that we consider at the top of biotech. Obviously, the other coast, California, has that as well. So one
Yep.
of the biggest risks that I had at the time was moving and deciding as a family that we were going to move to the state of Michigan, to Ann Arbor, Michigan. There are lots of reasons for that. I'll pause so we can talk a little bit about that. But for people who are listening, particularly women who are listening, when you're part of a family unit or a couples unit of two people, each with their career, it's very much a push and pull. And sometimes one person takes the lead and sometimes the other takes the lead. And this move to Michigan was very much us deciding as a family that there were lots of reasons why it'd be a good move, career-wise for my husband and from a personal standpoint for our family.
Right. Because you have children as well. Is that
I
right?
do. I
Yeah.
do. I have two daughters. And at the time when we moved to Michigan many years ago, they were just starting off on their school path. One was 2, one was 5, and we made the big move before either of them had started formal school.
Right. Yeah, because once they start those school friendships, then it would be the end of the world to leave them, wouldn't
It
it?
can be for any person who's been a working parent or even just a parent. Once your kids show up, they become a big part of the equation in ways that is nearly impossible to really understand until you step into those shoes. There were
Yeah.
family reasons why we moved back to Michigan. I actually grew up in Michigan and did K through 12 there. My grandparents who had come to this country from Taiwan, they were in various places in the country, but ended up settling in Adrian, Michigan for a very long time. And so we had a history with the state and as well as my parents who still live here as well.
So it wasn't a completely, we're going to go to a part of the country that we know nothing about.
That's
It
right.
was a sort of hook behind that. So,
That's
and
right.
great for the kids to be near grandparents and stuff
Yes,
like that, right?
absolutely 100%. So
Excellent.
so as a
So what
family,
started as possibly a risk and turned out to be the right move to do.
that's right. And I guess that's one of the takeaways for anybody who might be listening, particularly women in business and women in high tech companies. There can be a lot of multiple pressures from all around. When we moved from Boston to Ann Arbor, we knew it was going to be good for the family. We knew it was going to be great for the kids. My husband joined the University of Michigan as a faculty member. What we didn't know was what was in store for me, but I was willing to take a risk, what I thought was a risk, and really had the luxury of reinventing my career. So I was fortunate to join the University of Michigan as well and start to learn about the academic setting. I was asked to work with the dean of the medical school at that time to understand innovation coming out of the research enterprise. I was working with many of his research deans and leaders to think about ways that we could spin out more technology or work more effectively with industry partners and things that I had not really appreciated or even understood existed when I was working inside the walls of a very, very large, big pharmaceutical company. You don't really think about these things.
You're kind of in your box there, aren't you? Really, it's very
Yes.
much that this is
Yes.
my world here, and then you go outside and go, whoa, where's this world?
And in fact, that was one of the remits of my job at the University of Michigan was to help faculty there also understand the other side. What is it like to work in industry? I had a lot of faculty members look at me and say, "What's your job? Why are you here?" And a lot of it was translating the two worlds and go back to that theme that I said, it takes everybody. So academia
Yep.
has to understand how industry works so that they can work meaningfully together as collaborators, and it happens all the time.
Okay. So you're now at ONL Therapeutics,
That's right.
coming up for 5 years, I think. Is it? You've been
And I actually just passed the 5-year mark, which is really incredible when you think about a venture-backed startup company, but I've been quite
there? Yeah.
fortunate.
Okay. And you're the chief operating officer. Company's led by the wonderful David Esposito. I have to say, I have a lot of respect for that man. So tell me more about the company's mission.
Well, our vision and mission in a nutshell, we are here to help patients suffering from retinal disease. We want to help them see the future, is what we say. And
Okay.
it's more than just a tagline for us. There's only 14 of us at the company. So we are working in ophthalmology. We're working in a part of the eye that is where all of your photoreceptors and your cells that help you see, that translate all of that input to your eyes into imagery that your brain can process. So we work on the retina, which is the back of the eye. And our lead compound called zelafacetide is making its way through that long journey of drug development. And we are studying it right now in a global clinical trial for a form of age-related macular degeneration called geographic atrophy. And so there's a lot of scientific words in there, but at the end of the day, what we would really be so excited to see is this technology that came out of the labs of Dr. David Zaks at the University of Michigan to see this product get meaningfully down the path of development all the way in the future to maybe become a new drug that can help patients with their declining vision.
Okay. And now one thing you don't know about me, I'm obsessed with pharmaceutical adverts on the television.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, particularly the sing-along ones. So now going through my head at the moment is Izovade, it's GA going slower. Are
Well,
they gonna competitors of yours, or is it a completely different treatment?
they are a competitor of ours. It's so funny. I worked on many a direct to consumer advertising campaign at time at Pfizer in other highly competitive markets like allergy, so Claritin, Zyrtec, Allegra,
Yeah,
those days.
yeah.
Up until a couple of years ago, there were no approved treatments for geographic atrophy associated with AMD. There were no approved treatments. And so that is actually one of two treatments that just came to the US market a couple of years ago. That product, as well as the other one that's approved in the US, neither have gotten approval in other countries. I think one of them just got approved in Australia, but the European countries as a bloc, the EU, has actually pretty much rejected both of them or made it
Okay.
very, very difficult to to get approval for. We're hoping that our drug will be able to break through that challenge. The EU is very much they look at the safety of a product, but they also look at the not only the efficacy of the product, but the clinical impact of the product. So is the value of the product worth the cost? So we shall see. We're still in the earlier stages of clinical development, but we hope to be able to break through that.
Just get a really good jingle.
Yes, once we get through the approval process, we will definitely get some really good, consumer and physician advertising, I'm sure.
I'll start thinking about the jingles, and I'll send you my thoughts. You can use it, no charge, no problem. So, what is your role there as chief operating officer? Because that encompasses so many things in so many different companies. But with a company of your size, I would imagine there's a lot of different hats going through there. What do you do?
I've often been asked by people in the community to tell them about my job. What does a COO do? And it's really interesting because there aren't a lot of COOs in biotech, or I should say, the COO job is very much different in different biotechs.
Different,
It's
yeah,
because when you say operations, it might mean very different things. So, for instance, a company that might actually run a lab service and have what you and I and people would generally consider big operations or manufacturing plants, that COO has a very specific job around the operations, supply chain, all of that. For a company like us, where we're working primarily on executing clinical trials with contract research organizations and other vendors and partners, the COO role becomes even more broad. I technically will, the reporting functions into me include finance, HR, cybersecurity, IT, but there's a big part of what I do that is partnering with my CEO, David Esposito, whom you mentioned, and the two of us are very much also thinking all the time about the fundraising needs of the company. For a
yep,
company like ours that's pre revenue, which is most early stage biotechs, we're not going to have revenue for a really long time, which means we have to engage our investors and a community of investors into our development plan and our story and our trajectory overall. We feel really proud that we feel like we've put the money that the investors have trusted in us to very good use over the course
Yep.
of our time with ONL.
Excellent. So, and I know from posts I've seen of yours on LinkedIn, you're very much about teamwork and building with teams, and you've highlighted your team quite a lot publicly. What when you're building a team at a clinical stage company like yours, what matters the most? Do you think it's experience, adaptability, mindset? What do you think it is?
I had a I had a manager once who told me that what they needed the most in a company that has a lot of changing priorities is people who see a fire and run to the fire. And that's always stuck with me a lot because I think on the one hand, it's very important to have people who have functional expertise and great experience. I think that's great. That's almost a cost of entry. You can't be considered for a job unless you have at least some amount of credibility to actually perform the function. What's
Yep.
a little harder to suss out is cultural fit. And by
Mm.
cultural fit, it's not just have you worked in a small company before, but have you actually worked in a small biotech before where you will be asked to wear many different hats and or you will be asked to perform tasks that maybe at a big company that has many, many layers of people, somebody down the chain worried
Does
about
it for you?
you. I think it's a big cultural shift because at a small biotech that doesn't have any hierarchy or very little hierarchy,
Yeah.
sometimes you've got to just take it upon yourself to get to run to the fire and to bring your bucket of water and help to put it out.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Obviously, in my job, I work with small and emerging companies, but I talk to candidates who've been in big pharma, and I think I could do this job. And it's trying to explain to people, how would you cope when there's no standard operating procedure for something, and you've got to start writing it as you go along when you're quite used to just turning around and somebody says, "Oh, here's one that you can do," and it really is. It's funny that people who are in big pharma don't seem to see what that difference would be if they've never worked outside of it.
They very quickly will see it because
Absolutely. It's
if
what the
there was
cost
one
is of seeing
if
it.
there was one thing that looking back on my time in big pharma, and I did spend 12 years in big pharma, the one thing you have a lot of is safety nets. And
Yeah.
you do have redundancy, but with the redundancy comes safety nets. So if you're going down a process and there's some gaps, there's inevitably going to be things that are forgotten, important steps that are forgotten, or important key pieces that are forgotten. There's many, many safety nets. There's a lot of eyes on that process, and someone's going to
Yep.
say, whoops, we forgot something. We got to go back and do it. And so things take a long time because you inevitably have a lot of eyes on the process. But with that comes that safety net. At a small company like ours, there's a couple of things. One is you don't have that safety net, but what's really great about it is that then people have a lot of accountability. There isn't a lot of diffuse responsibility and accountability. The buck stops with just very few of us at the company.
Yep.
What that requires is a tremendous amount of trust that comes from a tremendous amount of transparency and consistent communication.
Mm. And what is your leadership style like? Tell me a bit about that.
I think leadership styles change over time. There's been a lot written about situational leadership and people require different things at different times. I think people
Yeah.
manage in different styles at different times. I certainly started off as a, you know, probably rough around the edges kind of a manager, but over time, I think my management style is very much one where I don't feel I'm a micromanager. You'd have to ask my people to confirm that. But
We'll
I'm
do a
not
poll later.
I'm gonna give a lot of rope if it's been earned. I'm going to make sure that things look like they're on a good path and then let it go. But what that
Yep.
means is that to go back to what I just said, consistent communication and transparency is going to be really key because that trustful relationship between the team and me is going to be predicated on clearly communicating how things are going. And if things are going bad, hey, let's talk about it. Let's put
Right.
this on the table and let's all work on it.
Okay.
particularly at a small company, there isn't as much, at least in our company, we've tried to strip away the fear of bringing bad news because we don't have time to candy coat or to dress up or to explain and caveat. A lot of times, the problems that we encounter, we need to work on right away. And the more people around the table, it's been proven many times, the more people you have around the table, the more ideas you get, and the faster you're going to come to one that's probably going to work.
As long as everybody understands that their idea might not be the one that does. They're part
Exactly.
of the process and just be
Exactly.
happy to be part of the process rather than having to be the one that their idea is taken kind of thing.
It's not always, and maybe it's true that not even most of the time do the best answers come from the most seasoned or the highest ranked or
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Right.
it takes
It's the
everybody.
one who doesn't know, who questions something,
Sometimes
right?
it's the one who doesn't know who's got a little bit of a wide lens view who
Yeah.
says, "You guys, I might not know exactly what's happening, but this seems off." And then all of a sudden everyone says, wow. Yeah, that's right. And that's happened in our company too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And one question I want to ask, and I don't think this would be at ONL, but throughout your career as you've grown through in different leadership roles, have you ever found that you've had to adapt your leadership style to meet expectations?
Oh, very much so. Probably the most abrupt change was moving from a industry corporate environment where you over time you don't realize everybody understands the rules of engagement. There's just certain ways you communicate and certain ways you talk. When I moved from that world to the world of academia and I'm working with faculty members who are giants in their respective fields. They're scientifically light years beyond wherever I'm going to be. There was a way of communicating that needed to be adaptive. So there needs to be a little bit of a respect for, hey, I got to meet you where you're ready to meet me. And coming at it from a highly corporate type of communication style or management style was just not going to work
Right.
um, in the academic setting. And
Yeah.
what it boils down to is the way you talk to people, you got to read the room. You have to respect the culture that you're entering, just like if you were visiting a foreign country,
Yep. Yeah. No.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
In actual fact, since I've been in the US, when I've gone to different states, I've had to read the room to realize that what happens in New York doesn't necessarily happen in Kentucky or isn't the same in San
And
Diego.
New
And
Yorkers, there you go. So not only industry, so for me, industry to academia, but moving from the East Coast to
yeah,
the middle of the country, very different cultures there. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, a funny anecdote is when I first moved back from Boston, and I drove a lot in Boston. If you've ever driven in Boston, you know it's not, not for the faint of
no,
heart. When I
wouldn't be.
first when I first moved back to Michigan, I was in the car with my mother and I was honking people. She said, "You can't do that. We don't honk in Michigan." And I said, "Well, in Boston, it's a form of communication."
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
like
honk
saying good
anymore.
morning.
I don't honk anymore.
So one of the other things that you're very much advocate maybe not be the right word, but I know you're very involved in women and supporting women within their careers and growing through, um, particularly young women. Now, where do you see from your experience that we've made some real progress for women in life sciences, and where are we still kind of telling ourselves a comfortable story?
Well, I thank you very much for bringing up this topic. I will say that I wish I was doing more, and I would like to do more, especially now that I'm in maybe the last quarter of the game, so to speak. I had an opportunity not that long ago to be invited to give a keynote speech as part of our Spark incubator here in Ann Arbor, our service group that helps small startup companies. And as part of that, I did a lot of research into women and how we've done and how where we still have work to do. And we still do have work to do, but the good news is that there has been a lot of progress. If you look at the number of women in even the undergraduate classes.
Yeah.
And across business schools and other medical school, now in most domains, women are actually over 50%. Right? So there's this tremendous flip of maybe decades ago that wasn't going to be the case. And I think that's a really good news story because it means that the K through 12 education process is really encouraging younger girls as they grow into young women and young adults to pursue academic success and academic goals. I think where it starts to get a little bit into the theme of we still have work to do is when you look at the higher levels of achievement. And so even at the graduate school level, like I said, medical school, graduate school, you still have a lot of women participating, but you do end up seeing um, nutrition of women as a percentage of the total pool when you start to go down the chain of higher level management, certainly board level representation, higher levels of tenured faculty, leadership positions in just about any domain. And so the question is, why is that happening? Some people
Mm,
might say, well, women are self selecting. They're not taking the promotions. And there is some data to suggest that that might be part of it. But what I talked about in my remarks is that we also, as a society, have to really look at the institutional systems, whether we're inadvertently creating institutional bias by not having support mechanisms in place to get women through the very important phase of their life from both career and parenthood. If it's something that they want to pursue, it's really happening at that same juncture of
yeah.
life, your 30s and even your 40s. That's when you're gonna have the biggest, car career trajectory growth. It's also
Yeah.
when people are having families. How do we make sure that one does not hinder the other and that we can actually pursue both?
Yeah. Yeah, and that was my own story as well. Just at that point in my career, and having my first child, and it was how do you navigate this? And fortunately, I had a very supportive partner who said, "Well, I'll take this part, allowing you to, but that's the time, isn't it, when you got to figure it
That is the
out?"
time. That is
Yeah.
the time.
So, what advice would you give to women stepping into roles where they may still be the only one at the table?
The only
What would
woman
your
at the
advice be?
table.
Yes, the only one of them at the table.
Yeah, no, I can speak to this from my own personal experience because I think it still happens. And it happened to me early on in my career as a management consultant. You might be in a client setting or just with your consultant peers or with, the partner levels. And they were at that time in the 90s, predominantly men. Um, a lot of it is learning to stand your ground, but also being a little comfortable with being uncomfortable. So if it makes you uncomfortable that you're the only woman there, and certainly for me, that did happened over and over again, or to be the
Mm,
only Asian American there or the only minority, non-majority person there, it's learning to be a little uncomfortable and being okay with that. Now,
right.
what do you do after that? Well, a lot of it goes back to your first question about a community and networks and what was it
Yeah.
like to go to a certain school. I think that's where having a community of people who maybe have had the same experience as you, to be able to talk to them about it or ask them for advice on it or pressure test. I felt this way. Have you ever felt that way? That can be really empowering to know that you're not the only one and to know that other people have been there before you and there will be other people after you. Yeah,
And it also helps to get different perspectives, isn't it? Because, your perception of something, it's your reality, but it may not be necessarily true. And so other people's input gives you an opportunity to reflect on that and think about the reality of it.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I think it's also a little bit of so you have to think about the environment and how you react to the environment. There's also a lot of introspection. What can I do about it? What's controllable? I can't
Yeah.
really control other people's responses, but I can control my own response to the situation. And
Yeah.
for me, that's been something I've worked on a lot. Maybe if people meet me, again, going back to my credentials on paper, they might be really surprised to learn that I've had multiple periods of time over my career where I've been filled with self-doubt, really filled with dread almost for new situations because I hadn't been there before and wanted to do a good job, and it's something I still continue to work at. People can look at a career and say, "Well, you've been doing it for so long, or you went to this or that school. You must be really comfortable with this." I think it's you got to just be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and it's going to keep happening.
Yeah. And the more comfortable you are being uncomfortable, the easier it becomes, right?
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's not going to go well. So there's never a promise or a guarantee that you're going to get an A on the test or you're going to knock it out of the park or that meeting's going to go really well. And the faster we get to that self reflection of saying, that didn't really go that great. What happened? And to get beyond the blame or the, self doubt or just to kind of embrace the fact that you're going to have to run up that hill again.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important thing. It's maybe people call it grit or resiliency or whatnot. Whatever you want to call it, it's just picking yourself back up and running up the hill.
Dusting yourself off and moving
That's
on.
right.
Something we're all doing a lot of at the
Yeah, we
moment.
all are. Everybody's, and some more than others. I mean, there's a lot happening in the world. So,
Yeah.
to be here with you and have the privilege of talking about a long career, that's something I'm very thankful for.
So what does the future look like? What's the future for ONL and for Connie Chang?
Well, for ONL, I'm nothing but excited for the company. The company, like I said, started as a kernel of an idea from someone's academic lab, and it was formed into a company in 2011. So it's been a number of years, a 15-year journey, and we're not done yet.
Yeah.
Um, so for the company, we're in the process of executing this clinical trial. We hope to be able to have results from the clinical trial in the next couple of years. We should be able to get a good sense of whether the drug is working the way that we hope it's working while also being safe for patients. So
Right.
that would be amazing. For myself, on a personal level, I still have a lot of life in me, I hope, and a lot of career left in me. But to go back to something you asked about, I really am at that stage where I'd love to give back and to become more involved in organizations that might have a mission as its core. You may be going back to the nonprofit sector in some way, shape, or form. There was something undeniably different about that and very satisfying about that. So who knows? I'm open to whatever comes next.
And I think, I work with mission-driven nonprofits as well as in the bioscience space, and I've seen more and more now emerging are these nonprofits that are really the founders of are people giving back within the science community, which is great to see, I have to say.
Yeah.
And I'm very conscious of your time. I can't believe how long we've been chatting for. It
Oh,
felt like 2 seconds. One more question I just want to ask you. Tell me something about Connie Chang that most people wouldn't know about you.
well, for all of our talk about the serious side of things, I love to just unwind with friends. I'm a big travel buff, and one of the things that I'm super into right now is learning different languages.
Oh,
and
okay.
and trying to really prepare myself for future opportunities to just go out and meet different people in the world. If there's one thing that I regret, it's not traveling more in my younger years and being unafraid to speak to somebody in their native language, even if it's broken. But, at the core of that is maybe, again, just to emphasize, people might not know that inside I can be very shy and filled with a lot of self doubt. And there's just a lot of anybody that you meet, there's a lot of polish on them. It doesn't mean that inside they're not still, um, working on themselves,
Yeah.
struggling with things, um, and trying to be better.
And I think that's so much of being part of being a woman, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
we present this to people and what people don't always see is what's going on underneath all
Yeah.
that, which goes right the way back to the importance of community and being able to be in a safe environment where you can talk to people about that and realize you know what, I'm pretty okay with me and how I present myself and being okay with that.
I love that. Being okay with me. As a woman, it's no wonder that we feel stressed. We're supposed to have careers, we're supposed to have family, we're supposed to get the lunches packed, we're supposed to get everybody everywhere on time, and we're not supposed to age. So, it's just a couple of things. Just a
Yeah,
couple of things.
just a couple of things we got going on for
Yeah,
Tree.
the expectations are huge for us, but it's also the expectations that we place upon ourselves.
Yes.
Um, so, the most surprising thing perhaps is that I'm human. We're all human. We make mistakes, we suffer through them, and we beat ourselves up about it. But, you pick yourself up, you just keep going.
Dust yourself off and keep going. Well, Connie Chang, I'm okay with you. I think you're great. So, thank you so much
Thank you, Sharon.
for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I wish you and ONL Therapeutics every success for the future, and I look forward to following that journey and humming along to the theme tune of your advert.
Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day.
And you take good care.
Bye
You
bye.
want to stay on now? I'm going to stop the recording.